He left me over text, right after draining every cent from our account. But what he didn't know, I was already 3 steps ahead. It was a Tuesday, nothing special. I was folding laundry and sipping cold coffee when my phone buzzed. One notification, one message, 4 lines that detonated my world in less than 10 seconds. Claire, I've met someone else. I'm filing for divorce. I've emptied our accounts. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Just like that. No warning, no conversation, just the digital death of 17 years together. She cried in silence, but only for a moment, because I had already felt him slipping away long before that text ever arrived. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't reply. I stared at the screen like it was some cruel joke, but it wasn't. It was Mark, the man who once swore he'd never hurt me, the man who now thought his silence and a stolen balance would be enough to break me. He thought I would stay paralyzed, financially frozen, emotionally wrecked. But that was his first mistake, because what he didn't realize was, she planned it all. 3 months earlier, I'd felt it. The strange shift, the late nights, the sudden secrecy. I knew something was off, even if I didn't have proof yet, so I stopped waiting for clarity and started preparing for impact. I opened a separate account in my name only, small deposits, quiet transfers, just enough to build a cushion he wouldn't notice, just in case. And oh, he never saw it coming. The moment that text hit, I logged into my private account, still safe, still growing. My rent was paid, my boutique was secure. He thought emptying our joint account would leave me gasping, but I had already learned to breathe without him. My silence was my answer, and I smiled through the pain, knowing he had no idea what was coming next. The truth is, he broke me first, long before that message, with his distance, with his passive-aggressive jabs about my body, my business, my silly dreams. That text was just the final confirmation. He didn't love me. He didn't respect me. I was nothing to him, and that realization stung far more than the zero balance notification from the bank. I walked into the boutique that day like nothing had happened, smiled at my staff, answered emails, restocked displays, because when everything collapses, you have 2 choices: shatter with it or stand in the rubble and build something better. I chose the latter, quietly, strategically. While Mark played the villain in a love story he didn't realize was about to flip. That evening, I opened my journal and wrote, Day 1, let the record show I did not fall apart. I started listing every shared asset, every document, every hidden clue he might have left behind. I checked our safe, found nothing. I checked our shared cloud, and that's when I found the messages, the ones he thought were deleted, screenshots, hotel bookings, whispered promises to a woman half my age. They laughed at me in those texts, called me bitter, said I'd be too busy playing dress up in my little shop to ever see it coming. And honestly, that was the moment everything inside me hardened. That was the moment revenge stopped being emotional and became logical, strategic, focused. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I could have responded to his text. I could have begged for answers, but I didn't, because betrayal doesn't deserve an audience. It deserves consequences, and mine were already in motion. The lawyer I quietly met with 2 weeks earlier, she had everything she needed. And Mark? He had no idea he was walking into a war I had already prepared to win. Because if he thought draining our bank account and disappearing with some girl would destroy me, he was dead wrong. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his unraveling. He thought he was playing chess, but I had already flipped the board, replaced the pieces, and called checkmate. Long before the text, I had already started preparing. It began as instinct, a gut feeling, that quiet ache you can't explain but can't ignore either. Mark had changed. Not in the dramatic, obvious way. He was too careful for that. But in the subtleties, the deflection, the cold smiles, the sudden interest in separate finances. That's when I started documenting everything. Because if there's one thing I've learned from stories of betrayal, it's that silence doesn't mean safety. It means strategy. I opened a personal account under my maiden name, deposited just enough each week to avoid suspicion. I digitized every receipt, every shared purchase, and every login he ever carelessly left open. I even took photos of our safe contents, knowing full well he thought I would stay blind to it all. But I wasn't staying. I was watching, listening, storing, proof like ammunition. The moment he sent that cruel message, I already had an attorney on retainer. I'd met her through a networking event at the boutique months prior. She was sharp, discreet, and specialized in asset protection. Over coffee, I explained what I suspected. She didn't flinch, just said, if you're right, we'll be ready. If you're wrong, you've only made yourself stronger. And that became my mantra. She planned it all, not out of paranoia, but preparation. Every time he bragged about handling the bills, I nodded. Every time he joked about how useless I was with money, I smiled. I let him believe the version of me he created, the dependent, docile wife who would never survive without him. He didn't know my silence was my answer, or that I had quietly stopped signing anything without reading twice and screenshotting it first. One night, I noticed an alert for a wire transfer he tried to hide, money moving from our joint account to a private fund in his name. He used our anniversary date as the password. That's when I realized he broke me first. Not when he sent the text, but when he started preparing his escape behind my back. So I started preparing mine in plain sight. I created a digital trail, password-protected folders, a printed binder with labeled tabs, email chains forwarded to a trusted friend. I printed photos, bank statements, text logs, the kind of paper trail that speaks louder in court than any tear ever could. So I showed him the proof, not to his face yet, but to the people who mattered, my legal team. Mark gloated for days. He sent a follow-up text bragging about his new freedom, mocking my boutique, even telling me to enjoy the single life while it lasts. He didn't know I'd already filed for an emergency hearing. He didn't know I'd locked down my business assets. And he sure as hell didn't know I'd already flagged suspicious activity with our bank. He never saw it coming. I used his arrogance as cover. Every cruel comment, every smug laugh, it all helped build my narrative. I wasn't just a wife left behind. I was a woman protecting herself from premeditated financial abuse. My lawyer helped me draft a sworn affidavit, backed by evidence, and pushed it straight to the judge overseeing our case. This wasn't a breakup. It was a legal ambush. He thought clearing out our account was the win, but what he didn't realize was I was letting him dig his own hole, one transaction at a time, one deleted message at a time, and every time I found another piece of the puzzle, I felt less broken, less afraid. I was deceived, yes, but not unarmed, and by the time he realized I'd flipped everything on him, we'd already moved to the next phase, taking back what was mine and stopping him from enjoying what was never his. He booked a luxury escape with our joint card, so I canceled everything and left them stranded with nothing but each other. He thought the damage was done, that after the text and the money grab, he'd walk away clean, richer, smugger, and victorious. But Mark never understood how real power works. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It moves quietly, legally, and with surgical precision. When I got the alert for a $7,800 charge on our joint card, I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, because he thought I would stay broken and silent. But this time, revenge was the card I was about to play. A 5-star resort in Tulum, first-class flights, champagne upgrades. He really went all in, like it was some kind of twisted celebration. A trophy trip with his new girl, the same girl from the texts, the one who called me a boring shopkeeper with too much time. He booked it all on the card we used for groceries, holidays, and back-to-school shopping. The disrespect wasn't just emotional, it was financial. He broke me first, and now he was flaunting it like a badge of honor. But what he didn't know was that I had already flagged our joint account weeks ago, quietly, carefully. The bank knew to call me for anything over $1,000, and the moment I confirmed the charge, I requested a freeze, a dispute, and full cancellation. I had the receipts. I had the legal right. I had the power. She planned it all, and now the parting gift he gave himself was about to unravel mid-flight. They landed in Mexico expecting rose petals and butler service. Instead, they got declined cards, a canceled reservation, and a front desk clerk who looked at them like fraudsters. I didn't need to be there to enjoy it. I imagined the moment perfectly. Her confusion, his frustration, the panic in his voice as he realized I wasn't the clueless wife anymore. My silence was my answer, and it echoed louder than any slap. Got the email at 2:14 a.m. from him. "What the hell did you do? I'm stranded here." I read it once, deleted it, then went back to sleep. Because I was nothing to him when he emptied our bank account, and now he could figure it out on his own. He wanted freedom. He got it. Just not the kind that came with beachfront views and spa treatments. The next day, he called 5 times, left voicemails, texted in all caps. He threatened lawyers, revenge, going public. I sent it all to mine, then blocked him, because I found the messages, and I had already submitted them to court. Let him scream into the void. His words had no weight where he was headed. The best part? His new girlfriend posted a now-deleted Instagram story from the airport, mascara running, tagging the airline in a complaint, calling it the worst trip of my life. I screenshotted it, of course, for the folder, for the courtroom, for the memory. The truth came out, not from me, but from the chaos they created themselves. What people like Mark never understand is that you can't destroy someone who's already built an exit plan. I wasn't clinging to hope. I was holding documentation. I wasn't begging. I was filing. He never saw it coming because he thought betrayal made him powerful. But what it actually did was hand me the perfect reason to rise. And that trip he tried to use as a victory lap. It became a turning point. Because from that moment on, he knew. Every step he took, I had already been there. And the next place I was going? Court. He thought he'd leave with half, Turns out, the only thing he owned was his delusion. Mark always walked like the world owed him something. That smug confidence, that little smirk when he talked about what's mine is mine and what's hers is negotiable. I used to think it was just ego. Turns out it was a strategy. He truly believed that when he left, he'd walk away with half of everything. My house, my business, my future. But like every arrogant man in a story like this, he never saw it coming. The house? It wasn't ours. It was mine. Titled solely in my name. A gift from my grandmother. Paid off years ago. Protected in a living trust. He had signed a quitclaim deed when we first moved in, eager to show me he wasn't marrying for assets. I kept that document, framed it, filed it, and when the time came, so I showed him the proof. The boutique, not even close to community property. I opened it before the marriage, registered it under my maiden name, used separate accounts, separate taxes, separate everything. He called it cute, said it gave me something to do. He had no idea it would become my weapon, my salvation, my kingdom. He laughed when I signed my first lease. I was nothing. To him, just a hobbyist with a credit card. But that little shop? It would outlive his entire financial footprint. He told his lawyer he wanted half the house. Half the business. Fair compensation, he said. But when the paperwork hit his inbox, the reality came crashing down. He owned none of it. Couldn't touch a dime. Couldn't claim a square inch. And the look on his face when he realized that, I wish I could have bottled it. Because she planned it all, years before he even imagined leaving. I remember him once saying, "If we ever split, at least I'll get the house." He said it like a joke, but I saw the glint in his eye, the calculation. I smiled back then. Let him think whatever he wanted, because I knew something he didn't. My silence was my answer, and I was never going to let someone walk away with what I built from love, sweat, and legacy. He tried to argue, tried to play victim, said I manipulated him into signing away his rights. His lawyer called it unfair. Mine called it airtight. Because when you protect yourself before the storm, you don't beg for shelter after. I wasn't reacting. I was reinforcing. He broke me first, and I made sure I'd never have to depend on someone like him again. The boutique grew stronger while his story fell apart. Customers rallied around me. My staff protected me like family. And Mark? He watched from a distance as the woman he underestimated became everything he never imagined. She finally left, and she took back every part of herself he tried to devalue. I reinvested in the store, bought new inventory, hired an assistant manager, expanded online. While he counted losses, I counted profits. And when people asked how I was doing, I smiled and said, better than I've ever been, because I was deceived. But now I was deliberate, clear, fierce. What Mark never understood is that power doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears lipstick and a business license. Sometimes it smiles at you while you're stealing, knowing full well your hands will come up empty. Betrayal may have been the spark, but it was my planning that lit the fire. And as we prepared for the court date, one truth became undeniable. He thought he was divorcing me, but really, he was setting me free. He walked into court like a winner. He left like a warning. I'll never forget the way he strutted into that courtroom. Expensive suit, cuffed sleeves, that same smug expression he always wore when he thought the outcome was already his. He didn't know that she planned it all. Every document, every statement, every piece of damning evidence. He thought the court would see a composed, successful man and a scorned, emotional woman. He never saw it coming. I sat calmly at the plaintiff's table, not as the wife he discarded, but as a woman who built a fortress out of every insult, every slight, every deception. I had a binder thicker than our marriage certificate, tabs marked with names, dates, screenshots, receipts. So I showed him the proof, not with drama, but with precision, one fact at a time, one exposed lie after another. His lawyer tried to paint me as bitter, emotional, financially unstable, but every word out of their mouth collapsed under the weight of my records. Business taxes filed independently, separate bank accounts, a flawless paper trail, and then those texts, the ones where he mocked me, bragged about draining our accounts, where he said, "Let her keep her little shop. She'll need it when she's broke." The truth came out in front of the judge, line by brutal line. His comments, his financial sabotage, the trip he charged to our joint card, the emails to Rebecca mocking me. Every word became a nail in the coffin of his case, and I didn't have to say a thing. My silence, the months I endured, planned, and prepared, was now my loudest weapon. When the judge asked him to explain the transfer of $27,000 to a private offshore account, he stuttered, blamed his assistant, then blamed me. The courtroom fell into that tense silence only the guilty know. He was unraveling, and everyone saw it. He broke me first, but now it was his reputation falling apart in real time. My lawyer remained calm, factual. She presented the timeline I had built, the documents I'd saved, and the witnesses who confirmed his behavior. The judge listened, nodded, and when the ruling came down, it wasn't just in my favor. It was a full-scale condemnation. Misconduct, financial abuse, a demand for restitution. His lawyer's face went pale, and Mark, he begged her to come back with his eyes. But there was no one left to convince. I walked out with full control of my assets, business, and name. He walked out owing court fees and scrambling for damage control. Every piece of his arrogance had been stripped away, and I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to gloat. My silence was my answer, and it echoed louder than any closing argument. Later, I heard he told friends I ruined him. That's how men like him rewrite the story. But the truth? He thought I would stay, quiet and cornered. Instead, I stood up in court and rewrote the ending. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because sometimes dignity wears heels and a legal binder. I was deceived, yes, but I was also prepared. And when it mattered most, I didn't flinch. I showed up, fully armed with the truth, and I let the facts do what heartbreak never could, end him publicly. And as I stepped out of that courtroom into the sunlight, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. But karma, as I was about to learn, wasn't quite finished with him yet. He thought I was the one who'd lose everything, but karma doesn't send warnings. It sends consequences. The courtroom loss should have been enough, but for men like Mark, it never stops there. He couldn't just accept defeat. He had to spin it. Within days, he was telling anyone who'd listen that I set him up, that the judge was biased, and that the real villain was me. But the truth came out, and this time, no one was buying his story. The luxury apartment he'd put a deposit on, gone. Frozen assets don't make for great credit checks. The job he bragged about for years, suspended, pending an internal HR investigation. Apparently, using company funds for business retreats with your girlfriend isn't just unethical, it's reportable. He broke me first, but now everything he touched was starting to fall apart, publicly, swiftly. Rebecca left him within a week. No dramatic goodbye, just a screenshot from a friend of her updated status. Single, focusing on myself. She blocked him on everything. Rumor has it, she's dating someone else already. And Mark? He's back in the guest room of his mother's house, sleeping under a motivational quote poster from high school. He never saw it coming, but the world he built on lies collapsed without a single push from me. His phone calls stopped. The rage, texts disappeared. What replaced them were silence and whispers. People who once sang his praises started keeping their distance. Old colleagues forgot to invite him to conferences. His brothers, once his biggest supporters, started asking me privately if the rumors were true. And when I sent them the evidence, they responded with one word: damn. He begged her to come back in small ways. Emails, a voicemail where he cried, claimed he made a mistake, that he missed the old days. But nostalgia doesn't erase receipts, and I didn't respond. My silence was my answer, as it had always been, because there's something sacred about watching someone choke on the story they wrote to destroy you. I didn't need revenge anymore, not actively. Karma had taken the reins, and she was doing a better job than I ever could. Every job lead he chased crumbled when background checks revealed pending court cases and asset freezes. Every person he tried to lean on had already seen the screenshots, and she exposed him without ever needing to say a word. Meanwhile, I was thriving, peacefully. I moved through the world unbothered while he unraveled behind closed doors. He once told me I was too emotional to succeed without him, and now I was nothing to him, but somehow I was everything he couldn't stop losing. The beauty of it all was that I didn't lift a finger, just kept growing, kept building, kept living like someone who didn't need to scream to be heard. I was deceived, but I turned that deception into distance, and that distance into dignity. And when a mutual acquaintance mentioned he might be thinking about therapy, I smiled. Not out of spite, but hope. Maybe now, with everything gone, he could finally face himself. But whether he did or didn't, that part was no longer my concern. Because while karma finished writing his ending, I was already living in the next chapter. He mocked my dream in one sentence. I turned it into my empire. The boutique he once called a little shop now has 3 locations and a 6-month wait list for custom orders. It still smells like lavender and fresh coffee when you walk in, but everything else has changed. New staff, new inventory, new energy. I kept it rooted in what I love, but scaled it into something even I couldn't have imagined. She finally left, not just the marriage, but the idea that her worth needed anyone else's permission. The framed text hangs behind my office desk. His words, forever frozen: "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." I look at it every morning, not with bitterness, but fuel. It's the quiet reminder that he broke me first, and in doing so, handed me the exact motivation I needed to rise louder, clearer, and completely unafraid. I started getting invites, business panels, podcasts, conferences. Women wanted to hear not just the story, but the strategy. How I protected my assets. How I built a brand while healing. How I handled betrayal and still found grace. I told them the truth. I was deceived, but I used the wreckage to rebuild the kind of life I didn't need to escape from. People asked if I'd ever remarry. I'd laugh and say, maybe, but I'm already in the longest, healthiest relationship of my life with myself. Because after all the noise, the lies, the courtroom drama, my silence was my answer. I let my life do the talking, and now it speaks fluently in freedom. My daughter helps at the boutique on weekends. I teach her things no one taught me: how to spot a manipulator, how to trust her intuition, how to walk away before begging someone to love her. She knows her mom isn't just strong, she's whole, and he thought I would stay broken forever. But she watches me lead, love, and live without fear. The day we opened our third location, I stood in the doorway for a while, just watching. Customers laughing, staff glowing with pride, my name above the entrance, in gold lettering. I thought about all the times I wanted to quit, all the times she cried in silence, wondering how she'd ever make it through. But here she was, owning her space, her time, her voice. She exposed him, yes, but more importantly, she discovered herself. And that version of me, she's never going back. Not for an apology, not for closure, not for nostalgia. Because when you outgrow the storm that tried to drown you, even thunder starts to sound like background noise. I mentor now, women going through separations, business owners in survival mode. I remind them, the version of you that's crying today might be the CEO of your life tomorrow. That heartbreak can become a launch pad. That betrayal can be the most unexpected blessing when you decide to stop carrying shame and start carrying strategy. And as for Mark, I heard he's still trying to get back on his feet. But by the time he realized what he lost, it was too late. Because when you weaponize love and call it power, don't be surprised when you wake up with nothing but regret. He never saw it coming, but honestly, neither did I, because the woman he thought he left behind, she became the woman no one ever dares underestimate again.